of Connecticut School of Medicine and who have been part of the team who has developed the Assist FC and who will be your presenters today. Just so you know, we are recording this session and it will subsequently be posted on the Ideas Exchange, and that we will have an opportunity for question and answer at the conclusion of the presentation, where the lines may be unmuted at that time, or you can, as you're going along, enter your questions in the chat function there on your screen. With that, I'm going to turn this over to our presenters and wish you all well.
So thank you, Joe and Amanda, and thank you, STANSA, for inviting us. Joe and Amanda, please feel free to bring we're difficult to hear. So yes, we're very excited to talk to you today about the Assist FC, which is a short version of the World Health Organization's alcohol, smoking, and substance abuse screening test, which is known as Assist, and I think many of you are familiar with. So as a background, the Assist instrument was developed by the World Health Organization by an international researcher with the purpose to detect and manage substance use and related problems in primary and other healthcare settings. The original Flu Assist project was spread over 3 primary phases that began back in 1997. The first phase was obviously a developmental phase. It included an international feasibility and reliability phase. The second phase was comprised of an international validity study, and the third phase was an international randomized controlled trial of brief intervention.
Hi, Bonnie. Sorry to interrupt. We seem to be having some interference. If folks on the line can make sure to mute their lines, that would be great. I'm going to go ahead and mute again just to try and prevent any feedback. And let me just unmute you, Janice and Bonnie. So sorry for the interruption. Janice, are you on?
Yes. So, yeah, this is Bonnie. Okay. So since those 3 phases have been completed, a lot of effort has been spent by WHO on the dissemination and implementation of the Assist. It has been translated into over 12 languages, and many folks are familiar with it. So the Assist was one of the first screening tests to cover all psychoactive substance categories, including alcohol, tobacco, and illicit drugs. It screens for health risks and problems associated with substance use and provides both lifetime and current estimates of substance use and related risks. The Assist can also help to identify patients who may be at risk of developing problems related to their substance use in the future, and it can also identify substance use as a contributing factor to a patient's presenting illness. The Assist can be linked to a brief intervention to help moderate risk substance users cut down their use and to motivate high risk to accept a referral to treatment. And where the caveat comes in, although the full 8-item Assist has acceptable psychometric properties and has been widely translated and disseminated, it is considered by many healthcare professionals to be relatively long for clinical use in some settings. So the purpose of the Assist FC development was therefore to identify through a series of statistical analyses a shorter subset of questions from the full Assist instrument that were comparable in psychometric properties for the classification of low, moderate, and high-risk substance use. So the webinar today will briefly describe the development, the Assist-FC, and then Janice will talk to you about how to use the instrument to identify individuals who may be using multiple substances that put them at risk for health and other problems. The development was supported by our SAMHSA-funded Connecticut State ESPERT grant in collaboration with WHO. So we're appreciative of the support that SAMHSA provided for the development of the instrument. So for those of you who are less familiar with the full assist, it measures both lifetime and recent use, which is defined by the past 3 months. The first question asks about lifetime use of 9 categories of drugs and is a filter question. And for those substances endorsed by patients, then additional information is asked about the frequency of use, again in the past 3 months, of those items that are endorsed in the first question. The next 3 questions ask about compulsion to use, health, social, legal, or financial problems resulting from use, and failure to fulfill role obligations. The final 3 questions then relate back to lifetime use and ask about other individuals' concern about the patient's substance use or failed attempts to quit or control use, as well as injecting drug use. Each question response has a value which is weighted according to how much they contribute to individual risk based on the results of analyses from the WHO validation, which was a phase study. To score 1, responses 2 through 7, thereby a substance-specific involvement score, or an SSI score, for each psychoactive substance. The scoring procedure estimates the relative importance of these risk behaviors, prioritizing counseling interventions. So for our analyses in developing the new shortened assist, we made use of medical patient data from 3 pre-existing data sets, all of which have utilized the assist screening tool with patients. 2 of the data sets were used to examine reliability metrics and conduct classification analyses for the combinations of assist items. Sample 1 was from phase 3 of the WHO Assist Brief Intervention Randomized Clinical Trial, which contains 731 medical patients. And then the second sample included 10,438 medical patients who screened positive for 1 or more illicit substances in their lifetime and received ESPERT services as part of our Connecticut ESPERT program. The third sample was used to estimate sensitivity, specificity, and positive predictive value for the shortened assist instrument using a structured diagnostic interview, the Mini Plus, which was included in that sample. And this data set was comprised of 1,047 patients from the phase 2 assist validation study. And for those of you not familiar with the Mini Plus, it's a short structured diagnostic interview that assesses either the presence or absence of various psych disorders. So as we began our analyses, we immediately eliminated question 1, which is the lifetime use, and question 8, which is the injection drug use question, from this brief version, as neither of those 2 questions are used in the assist substance-specific involvement scoring routines. And those SSIs are the primary risk scores that are typically used in clinical practice. And we know that lifetime use is an important factor, or may be an important factor, in determining overall risk from a past drug use history. But we thought that current use was considered to be more relevant to a patient's presenting health condition. And as far as the injection drug use question goes, it's likely that even without a targeted question, if a patient screens positive for current opioid or cocaine use, that may come to light through additional questioning by the provider. So with that in mind, our initial reliability analyses were conducted on samples 1 and 2 to identify candidate items for the shortened version of the assist. Questions 2, 3, and 6 were the ones that showed good ranges of internal consistency with a total assist substance-specific involvement scores, or the SSI scores. We then selected question 2, which is frequency of current use, as the first question for the shortened assist because of its strong performance and its sort of intuitive advantage as an introductory screening question. So we have the frequency question, the strong desire or urge to use, and concern by others as the 3 that were showing the best consistency.
Great.
So then based on, based on reliability metrics, we looked at 4 combinations of the best performing items, those 3 items, to examine the optimal risk classification of a brief assist score relative to the total SSI scores. So for example, we looked at 2 and 3, 2 and 6, 3 and 6, 2, 3 and 6. And as you see on your screen, the combination of question 2 and 6, which is the frequency of use and concern by others, yielded the most comparable classification. Therefore, the assist FC was then born and christened.
Bye.
And then looking at concurrent validity of the assist FC instrument, we used sample 3 data set, which was from the assist validity study and contained 1,047 patients, to compare the full assist and the shortened assist FC SSI scores with the mini plus the diagnostic interview count of abuse and dependence items for each substance category as the diagnostic severity measure. So this was essentially our gold standard. And with regard, as you can see in the slides, to sensitivity, specificity, and positive predictive value, results were pretty highly comparable across the 2 instruments when assist and assist FC were compared to a diagnosis of dependence, either positive or negative, based on the mini plus. And you'll see that some drugs were missing. We did not have enough sample size to evaluate, I believe, hallucinogens and inhalants. So then we looked at cutoff points. A variety of cutoff options were examined, and we employed a recently developed ROC-based metric that allowed for optimal threshold determination with the 3 ordinal classes. So you can see here for the low cutoff risk for low risk for alcohol is 0 to 10, other substances 0 to 3, and then for the that's for the full assist, and the assist FC with those just the 2 questions is 0 to 5 for alcohol and 0 for low risk for the other substances. And then you can compare the moderate category for the full assist with the moderate ranges for the assist FC. And then the high cutoffs for the assist FC are 9 to 12 for alcohol and 7 to 12 for other substances. And Janice will describe in more detail how to use those to kind of link with a brief intervention. So the conclusions in developing the assist FC is that we were able to reduce the number of items, significantly reduce the number of items with little loss in reliability, validity, and predictability when compared to the full-length assist version. Not only is the new instrument supported statistically, but also intuitively as a clinical tool with a combination of questions measuring the frequency and concern. So it's relatively easy for clinicians to learn and remember without much prompting. The Assist FC is comparable with the full Assist training packages developed by WHO and PAHO and other training centers. Many packages have been developed, and we're in the process of trying to develop a manual that will link with the fuller Assist manual. So that being said, I wanted to end this. I'm sorry. We wanted to end this half of the program with a slide from our Connecticut Expert program with data from that program. And I know that many of us who have worked in the Expert field for a long time know that it's been a daunting and oftentimes unsuccessful task to implement just alcohol-focused screening in healthcare settings. So I know that to encourage screening for all substances may seem even more unrealistic given time constraints and busy clinics. However, this slide is just a reminder that substance use behaviors do not travel alone or by themselves. So this slide is a cut from our, as I said, our Connecticut Expert data. These are 13,489 patients who screened either at moderate or high risk on the Assist for these different categories of substances. And as you can see, the blue bar indicates the percentage of those using just one substance for each category. The red bar is using two substances, or being at risk for two substances. Green is 3, dark purple is 4, and so on. So as we screen for just alcohol, we can see that approximately 40% of those patients who screen at risk for alcohol use are also at risk for another substance, and 20% will be at risk for their use of 3 substances. And from additional data that is not shown on this slide, we know that from our population, for those screening positive for at-risk alcohol use, 65% will also be at risk for their concurrent tobacco use. About 25% of those who screen at risk for alcohol use are also at risk for their marijuana use. 12% will be at risk for their cocaine use levels, and another 8% will be using prescription opioids or heroin. And if you kind of walk down each one of the types of drugs, you see that cocaine, heroin, prescription opioids, hallucinogens, sedatives all have multiple risk use across. So the fact that oftentimes we sort of ignore those because we're simply screening for alcohol alone or tobacco alone, I think is important. And I think some of these large large SAMHSA expert initiatives have been really wonderful in pulling out that data and making the case, along with the opioid crisis, I might mention, for screening for more than just alcohol. So with that said, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Janice, who will talk about the more practical uses of the Assist FC.
Okay, so now I'm actually just going to walk through with you the proper way to actually administer the Assist frequency and concern short form. So introducing the screening instrument is particularly important for patients who may feel like they're being singled out for screening services. So a few key elements that really must be emphasized in the initial screening process sort of include a statement indicating that screening is universal. So you can start by saying, we ask all patients about these questions, that alcohol and drug screening is a standard of care. So we ask these questions because the use of these substances may affect your health and can interfere with other medications, and that the information they provide is confidential. So like all aspects of your medical record, the information we talk about will be kept confidential. So those are a couple of kind of key things that should really be included in the introduction. And using a standardized introduction is important and can really help in a number of ways. So what you see there on the screen is the actual Assist FC introduction. It provides a rationale for the questions. It informs patients about what you'll be asking about, and it defines a time window of interest. So it's helpful to also provide anchor points, for example, in this assessment for the past 3 months. So if you were assessing someone today, you might say from the 31st of May up until today. It's also important to provide the patient with a drug list that lists the substances that you'll be asking about. The response card for the Assist FC, it's just slightly different from the response card that you might use for the full Assist, but it shows a list of the substance categories along with generic or slang terms used with them. And at the bottom of the card, you can see that it shows the patient the response options for those 2 questions. This list can be modified to include the 5 most prevalent substances in the location in which it's being used. One of the things we did with the Assist FC is reduce the number of drug categories, and in particularly here, due to generally low prevalence rates, we removed the inhalants and hallucinogens categories from the list. However, you can simply add those back in if you wish, or record them in the other category. And we've really received a lot of positive feedback from folks in medical settings about the usefulness of this particular response card, you know, because I think it really helps patients to kind of look down and see what substances you're asking about. However, you should be note that patients with limited literacy skills may be put off or intimidated by a list like this. So you really need to use your best judgment in determining when it's truly appropriate. So here you can see the actual assessment. The introduction is at the top of the page and can be directly read to patients or paraphrased. Question 1 asks about the frequency of substance use in the past 3 months, which gives an indication of the substances which are most relevant to the patient's current health status. So if the response is never to all substances in question 1, you would end the interview. And for each substance endorsed in question 1, you would immediately ask question 2 for that substance, and then move on to the next substance. So different from the full assist, where the full assist you would go down for each question. You would ask each question for each substance. In the shortened form here, you go question 1.
Oh my God!
And then question 2.
I am flabbergasted.
So as I mentioned, question 2 asks about whether anyone has ever expressed concern about the patient's use of a substance and how recently that occurred. So regarding the alcohol section of the full assist, a long-standing criticism is its inability to identify heavy episodic drinking or binge drinking, especially in individuals who may do so infrequently. Patients who binge drink occasionally may score in the low risk category on the full assist, even though they are at risk of acute problems related to their alcohol use and would benefit from a brief intervention. The full assist only used the frequency question in order to maintain compatibility with the other drug classes. And because of this deficiency, a supplemental binge drinking question is often included in the screening process. So you'll notice that in the Assist FC, after the alcohol frequency question, there's a question that asks about binge drinking. So how often have you had 5 or more drinks on one occasion for men, and then for women you would substitute in 4 or more drinks. So although the addition of this binge question alters the original structure of the instrument, we do suggest it as a practical option in the Assist so that you could actually include it or not include it, but based on preliminary analysis reported here, the screening, the scoring and accuracy of the Assist for the alcohol score is actually improved by replacing the alcohol frequency item with the binge item. So when scoring the Assist, an answer should be recorded for each substance category in question 1. And if the substance was never used or has not been used in the past 3 months, never should be circled. For question 2, an answer should be recorded only for the substance the patient reports using in the past 3 months. For individuals who report drinking alcohol, question B1, the binge drinking question, should be asked about the frequency of binge drinking. Note that you can see here on the form that this item, the item B1, the binge drinking question, is not counted in the scoring for alcohol. But if the patient otherwise scores low for alcohol in the low risk range, yet reports binge drinking, a brief intervention should be delivered. So that's a sort of an exception to that low category rule for alcohol. So for each substance, add up the scores for questions 1 and 2. So in this case, you can see that the patient scored low, or in the low risk range for alcohol, and a BI should be, but a BI should be delivered to discuss the risks of binge drinking. So even though they scored 4, which scores between 0 and 5, because they report some binge drinking, you would still provide a brief intervention. And you can also see that the patient scores in the moderate risk range for marijuana. So for patients scoring the low risk range, these individuals are not reporting any use of drugs, and the frequency of their alcohol use is likely to be within the recommended limits. So educational feedback is recommended for these patients. For those whose use puts them in the moderate risk range, the yellow area, these individuals are reporting some substance use and may be experiencing some health, social, or financial problems related to their use. So a brief intervention is recommended where time permits. And where time permits, additional substance use information should be collected by administering the full assist. And for those whose use puts them in the high risk range, these individuals are likely experiencing more severe health and other problems related to their use. So you would provide a brief intervention to help reduce risk and facilitate a referral to more intensive treatment or specialist treatment. And again, additional substance use information should be collected using the full assist. So remember that you still need to use your clinical judgment in interpreting these scores because it's a short form. Sensitivity and specificity are not perfect. So for example, a patient may drink every day and only consume 1 standard drink, but despite being within the guidelines of lower risk drinking, she may score in the lower risk range, in the moderate risk range. And likewise, a patient may score in the low risk range for alcohol, but the information from the binge drinking question will help inform the provider about additional risks the patient may be experiencing. So therefore, if time is of the essence, the instrument has been statistically validated to use as a standalone, providing comparable risk levels with the full instrument. And a major strength of using the full assist is that the patient and provider enter into a dialogue, encouraging the patient to talk about his or her substance use, and at the same time provide a basis for a brief motivational intervention with the patient. Therefore, it is actually recommended that for those who screen positive on the Assist FC and where time permits, additional substance use information be collected by administering full assist.
So looking at next steps and what where we're going with the Assist FC development, we do have a publication that is under review that we are revising and resubmitting to and that's the citation for it. We are working with WHO and possibly SAMHSA. I'm not sure exactly where this step is on a field trial, which is in planning phases to look at reliability and validity in clinical settings. Since this is just statistically validated, it hasn't been tested across samples and across cultures. However, we have been heavily pilot testing it here in Connecticut. It's in full swing with our Connecticut Health Professions Training Grant that we have another year to implement. It's being embedded in medical school, nursing school, pharmacy and dental curricula. It's been built into the EHRs at one large federally qualified health center, and they've started using it over the past 3 or 4 months. We hope to have more data for you for this presentation, but to date they've screened about 5,000 patients with, it looks like, the normal ranges of those at risk for each one of the substance categories based on our Connecticut expert data. So that's exciting. And we're developing the Assist FC manual that will be linked with the full manual, and so it can be part of the Who Assist family. And we are encouraging folks to field test it. I think as soon as the publication is out, that will be a green light to pilot test or to use it in your clinical settings to determine how you think it's working. So I think I will end there, and Amanda and Joe, maybe we can answer some questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Bonnie and Janice. Really appreciate it. I still have the lines muted. I will open them, but we may have some interference at first until we are able to unmute folks or mute folks who have some background noise. I did have one question come in via chat that I wanted to share first, and then I'll go ahead and open the lines and we'll try to take some questions. So the chat question was, given that cannabis is legal for adults in many states, some for CBD products only and others for both THC and CBD, on what basis is a provider supposed to think of a person using those products several times per month, perhaps orally, as being at moderate risk, based on what empirical evidence?
That's a great question and not uncommon. But what we have been recommending is that if, just like any other prescription drug, if someone has been prescribed CBD or some form of THC for a medical condition by their provider and is under their care and are using it as prescribed, then just like the introduction of the Assist said, that we're really not concerned with that. We're concerned with abuse. So if someone's using someone else's cannabis or is is driving while they're high or doing any other something that could put them at risk or others at risk.
Multiple substance use. Also.
Yeah, or using multiple substances, then you should be concerned with that. So it's kind of like if they're on prescription opioids, you don't want to be using those if you're feeling under the influence while you're using them. You shouldn't be driving, and you shouldn't be perhaps taking care of children. It depends on how they affect you, but that's what you should be concerned about, I think. I hope that answers the question.
Great, thank you so much. We had another chat question before I open up the lines, that we're wondering whether the tool was validated for the elderly population, 65 plus, and whether the cutoffs are different.
So the tool has only been statistically validated. So that would be the next step, to be using that in a field trial across samples, across ages, across cultures. So the answer to that is no. We have been using it, as I said, in Connecticut, but we haven't had a chance to actually look at the data, to look at the age ranges.
Yeah, only one of those samples will have included, it's the Connecticut Expert Program, will have included folks over the age of 65. So because of that, and we didn't do any subgroup analyses, but because of that, we would want to test it independently with that sample.
Great, thank you so much. Let me go ahead and open the lines. Bear with me for a moment in case there's any background noise, and I'll go ahead and mute those noisy lines, but I want to give people an opportunity who are on mute to go ahead and ask questions. Others, feel free to continue to chat questions, and just hold on a moment while I unmute and then try to open the lines and kind of silence some of the noisy lines. So just a moment.
So I think there's a lot of power.
Okay, Okay, the lines are open. Do we have any questions from anybody on the line? Any questions for Bonnie and Janice from anyone on the line? Sorry, I'm just trying to mute some of our noisy lines while we wait if we have any questions.
Hi, this is Joe. If you can hear me through the noise there, I have one question for you.
Joe, do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Okay, yeah, I'm just curious what has been the response of the medical providers as you have pushed the Assist FC out into the practice settings. I'm aware, but with some of the earlier responses about the full assist, I'm just curious what has been there, how have they regarded it?
And Janice and Bonnie, I'm going to go ahead and mute the lines again while you're responding.
We've had good response, Joe. As I said, we've pilot tested it primarily through our health professions training project, but in those federally qualified health centers where we've introduced it, the one large one immediately put it into their into their EHR, and they were excited about not having to use the audit C with the binge question piece as well. And people are always happier to use a shorter instrument as the audit C versus the audit. I think we all have experience with that. What I don't know is how well or how much information providers feel like they're getting for a brief intervention. So just as with a short pre-screen, you don't have the good information to use for feedback for a brief intervention, and we haven't really done those focus groups or those sorts of analyses. So that's what we're looking to do next, to really find out whether the information they're getting is enough or whether they're considering just going on and doing the full assist, which is, I think, what's going to happen in our hospital here that's adopting the assist into their EPIC, their new EPIC system. So we're not quite sure, but folks are definitely happy to have a shorter version.
Yeah, and just to add to that, we have had 2 instances of folks who are interested in putting it into their EHR. Bonnie mentioned the one here in our inpatient psych department. But what they wound up doing is we've offered them both, and they wound up going with the full assist, which we weren't expecting. So I think a lot of them all of a sudden realize, oh, this short form is great, but it doesn't give us a lot of information when it comes to being able to provide a brief intervention based on the responses.
Yeah, and I think in clinical settings where there is more time, maybe at like in inpatient settings and dental settings, they have a little more time. Sometimes the dental hygienist can ask more questions. The full assist obviously gives one more information. So I think in the very busy primary clinics, they aren't able to do a full assist every time. So
great, thanks so much, Bonnie and Janice. I have what I think is a follow-up to the elderly question earlier in the chat, and it says that normally the elderly binge rate is 4 and above, like females. Is this the assumption as you move forward testing for QB1?
Yes, that would be the assumption.
Okay, great. We had another chat question that said, it's nice to see this validation work being done. What would be the benefit of using a pre-screen when the Assist FC is so brief and has been validated for a number of substances?
Well, one of the best uses for pre-screen would be to identify those who you don't need to screen further. So it's a quick way of getting through. To identify those who don't need further services on the full assist would still take longer than the short form. So
although I agree with the question. There has been pushback. I think when people see the full assist, the 8 items with all of the lists of drugs, they believe it's going to take a very long time. And actually, when it's pre-programmed in an EHR, it's very quick, and obviously gives you more information. But the trend has been to have pre-screens available, and I think we're just responding to the pushback. It's not the same in the European countries. One of the reviewers of the paper noted that it's being used quite globally in European clinics, but here we've had so much pushback that we thought we would develop this, but we don't want to give up the full assist if folks screen positive. I think it's still important to get all of that information. And I think, for example, with the Audit C has pretty much taken over the full audit. I don't think we see the full audit anymore, especially in EHRs. And that's our biggest concern, is that it will become the new full screen when the full assist, if it's done properly and if it's programmed, if it's computerized, it does not take that long. I feel for you.
Great. Great, thank you. I see that Wynn Turner has his hand raised, so I'm going to open your line. Wynn, are you able to?
I think you can hear me. That was us in the elderly question, so I think I'm all set. Thanks, and just saying hi to Bonnie.
Hi,
great, thanks. Okay, so I don't think we have any other chat questions at the moment. I can attempt to open the lines again. It may take a minute just to filter out any of the noise, or people can feel free to continue to ask chat questions. Let me go ahead and try to open the lines. Bear with me for a moment while I mute those lines that are a bit noisy. So hold on just one moment. And if you could mute your lines yourself, that would be great. All right, the lines are muted. I'm going to go ahead and try and mute some of our back.
I didn't have the final PDF.
Do you have any questions for Bonnie on the assist step C?
Hey.
All right, well, it seems like we may be out of questions today. Any questions, anyone on the line? Great, thanks so much, Bonnie and Janice. I will turn it over to Joe for a closing.
Yes. Again, thanks everyone for being on this webinar today, and thank you, Bonnie and Janice, for a great presentation. As I'd mentioned before, this recording will be posted on the Ideas Exchange for colleagues of yours who may not have been able to attend today, and we look forward to future webinars with folks in the coming year.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.